Let's take a look at the cases and discuss the problems that one has with attempt and mens rea and actus reus. And first, we'll take a look at the mens rea cases. The first case in the area of mens rea is the Gentry case, People v. Gentry. Stanley Gentry was convicted of attempted murder after pouring gasoline on his girlfriend, which then ignited. Now, one would think that it would be a pretty short jump from those facts to attempted murder, but indeed that was not the case in this situation, and it raises several solid points about the crime of attempt. The victim testified that she and Gentry had been drinking all afternoon, and both of them were pretty high, according to her testimony. She also said that Gentry had purposefully poured gasoline on her, and later she got a little too close to the stove and she burst into flames. But she also said that Gentry immediately tried to snuff out the fire by placing a coat over the flames. She was severely burned, but he probably did save her life. These facts are outrageous, and again, your first response might be, how in the world is this not attempted murder? But that takes us to the issue of mens rea. We need intent here. And the trial court charged the jury as follows. First, it got it right. It said a person commits the offense of attempt murder when he, with intent to commit the offense of murder, does any act, and so on. But the trial court had got it wrong when it went on to elaborate as to the nature of attempt murder. It said a person commits the crime of attempt murder where he kills an individual if, in performing the acts which cause the death, he intends to kill, or do great bodily harm, or knows that such acts will cause death, or knows that such acts create a strong probability of death. Now, none of those things really, other than intent to kill, none of those things in the rest of that jury charge are accurate. And so in the case of attempted murder, Gentry had to have intended to actually kill his victim. And here it was Gentry himself who extinguished the fire. And even though he was the one who had originally poured the gasoline on Ruby, and there was no evidence that he had started the fire. She testified that it was by her own act. So we have dual intents, if you recall, in attempt. First, we have the specific intent to kill, which is an essential element of the crime of attempted murder. And the trial court was required, when it instructed the jury on the crime of attempted murder, to make it clear that specific intent to kill was the pivotal element of that offense, and that intent to do bodily harm or knowledge that the consequences of his act could result in death or bodily harm was not enough in this case, because we have this dual intent requirement of attempt. Now, again, the actor must intentionally commit the acts that constitute the actus reus of attempt. So this is the intent to attempt, and then he must perform the act with a specific intent of committing the substantive or the target crime. So again, very important, two intents when we're dealing with attempt. PA attempt law says that it is a criminal attempt when a person with intent to commit a specific crime does any act which constitutes a substantial step toward the commission of that crime. We talked in the first section of this presentation about the substantial step test and how it cuts through a lot of the analysis problems that arise from the four common law tests that are still used in different jurisdictions. Impossibility in Pennsylvania, we'll get to that at the end here, is specifically rejected as a defense to a charge of attempt, and renunciation or abandonment is a defense to attempt in Pennsylvania as long as it's voluntary and complete. Grading of the attempt offense in Pennsylvania is the same grading as the most serious crime attempted. Many jurisdictions use various formulas to distinguish lawful mere preparation from unlawful criminal attempt, and I say lawful mere preparation, they may have chosen not to file charges. We know that preparation is usually step number 4 and exposes you to criminal culpability. But for attempt purposes, we distinguish between preparation and perpetration, and we look for that substantial step test. The MPC uses that, but we don't have the whole MPC provision in our Pennsylvania Crime Code. We have a very broad approach in terms of the scope of liability for attempt and a substantial step requirement in the The next case is Bruce v. State. It's an attempted felony murder. Attempted felony murder, of course, can't be because a conviction for felony murder requires no specific intent to kill. It follows that because the criminal attempt is a specific intent crime, attempted felony murder is not a crime in Maryland, and that's a similar case in Pennsylvania and some other jurisdictions. Now let's look at attempted actus reus, or the consequences of having your hand caught in the cookie jar. United States v. Mondahano is the first case, and this is a case in which there's an attempt to distinguish preparation and attempt examining actus reus. We know what happened here. You can read the facts for yourselves. Mondahano gives us several examples of this tension between preparation and perpetration, and shows the difficulty in drawing a bright line between steps 4 and 5. But there is a quote here that lays out that difficulty rather eloquently from John Strayhorn, and it goes as follows: both as fascinating and fruitless as the alchemist's quest for the philosopher's stone has been the search by judges and writers for a valid single statement of doctrine to express when, under the law of guilt, preparations to commit a crime become a criminal attempt threat. So there it is. That's the tension, and that shows you what the difficulty is in most of the cases. Now, in Commonwealth v. Peasley, we look at preparation and perpetration, and we begin to look at these common law tests at work. This is a dangerous proximity test and last act test, perhaps. The defendant here wanted to burn down a building. He went to the building and he assembled all the things that he would set on fire that he'd hoped would then spread throughout the building and burn the building down. He wanted to place a candle on a piece of wood in a pan of turpentine and light it, but and even he didn't want to do it himself, so he solicited a young man to carry out the lighting of the combustibles. And when they were on their way over there, the young man refused, and the defendant changed his mind, never got closer than a quarter of a mile away, and drove away. Now, if he had been charged with solicitation, that would have been his last act, and there probably would have been a different result here, but he was not charged with solicitation, and so he managed to evade conviction. Now, People v. Rizzo, again, distinguishing preparation from perpetration, looking at one of the common law tests. The test here is the dangerous proximity test. People v. Rizzo was a case of marauders who never found their mark, according to the judge. Now, this opinion starts off with the judge praising the police and talking about what a great job they do and how grateful we all should be because of their dedication and their service. When an opinion starts out like that, the prosecution's case is probably getting flushed, and the judge is just trying to let them down easy, and that's certainly the case here. So we have Rizzo and his pals. They're looking around for a guy that they plan to rob. They can't find him, but a couple detectives have been following them, and those detectives arrest them for an attempt crime. And as the court rules, even though Rizzo and the others had every intention of committing a crime, if they are unable to find the object of the crime, an action in attempt does not lie. So Rizzo and the gang lived to maraud another day. The next case is People v. Miller. Again, this is an example of the unequivocality test of the common law test that we have reviewed. The question was, did Miller's actions constitute attempted murder? And this is a scene that plays out in a field on a ranch. It involves a constable who takes a gun from an angry individual who apparently seemed at least hell-bent on shooting the potential victim here. But again, there was no attempt crime found here. In order to have an attempt, you need an intent to commit the crime plus a direct, ineffectual act done towards its commission. Mere intent and/or preparation are not sufficient. The line is drawn where preparation leaves off and execution begins. Now, I think this case may have been wrongly decided. That may be because there's some code of honor in these ranching communities. This is a Wild West case where it is easier to minimize the handling of weapons, and I think that perhaps that's what happened here. But in any event, under the unequivocality test, the courts ruled that it was equivocal behavior and did not necessarily rise to the level of an attempt to kill. Now, the last case we're going to talk is State v. Reeves. Those headshots you see to the left of the slide are really only relevant here because these folks were involved in an infamous murder by poison case here in Pittsburgh. Robert Ferrante was convicted of poisoning his wife, Amber Klein, with cyanide. They were both UPMC docs. The case was featured on Dateline NBC. And so we learn here that a substantial step is not just one step necessarily from State v. Reeves. Another comment about poisoning, murder by poisoning is considered to be especially evil because it takes a great deal of planning. There are many opportunities that you can embrace to turn away from the crime. Sometimes the poisoning must take place over time, and it is a difficult crime to solve if it is done right. So let's look at State v. Reeves. Here we have two 12-year-old girls, not two docs at UPMC, but they agree to kill their teacher with rat poison. They even pick a date. They carry the packet of rat poison to school. They talk to somebody on the school bus, tell them what they're going to do. That person tells another teacher who tells the principal. And in any event, the girls get busted for this. The question was, did their conduct constitute attempted second-degree murder in a substantial step jurisdiction? And the court says substantial step does not necessarily require proof of a particular act. A substantial step is proven when the person's entire course of action is corroborative of the intent to commit the offense. And that would be an especially important interpretation in cases of poison because of the nature of the crime. So that wraps it up here for the substantive cases in this area. In the next section, we will look at the defenses of impossibility and abandonment.